Imagine a Texas where bustling towns have become eerily silent, streets stripped of life and homes abandoned as vestiges of a once vibrant community spirit. This isn't a scene from a dystopian novel. It is the emerging reality of many Texas cities facing an unprecedented housing crisis. In the next 15 minutes, we will journey through 10 cities that present a cautionary tale, exploring the economic, social, and policy decisions that have pushed them toward becoming modern-day ghost towns. Our story begins with striking numbers. In 2022, Texas was already struggling with a severe housing shortage, with a deficit of over 320,000 homes, an alarming rise from 306,000 the year before. This gap in supply has driven housing prices upward and rent into uncharted territories, placing an unbearable financial burden on local residents. As we trace the roots of this crisis, we encounter painful examples of how geography and policy can transform thriving communities into deserted landscapes. In communities spanning from urban heartlands to the outskirts of rural Texas, the contrast is stark. While areas near Interstate 35 witness population booms and rapid urban growth, towns in the High Plains and West Texas see their residents steadily dwindle, leaving empty stores and vacant neighborhoods in their wake. This narrative is not simply about numbers, it is about families, dreams, and livelihoods slowly being eroded by an inescapable crisis. Throughout our documentary, we will hear from local residents whose lives have been upended by soaring rents and dwindling opportunities. One resident of a now nearly forgotten town recalls the vibrant community events of yesteryear. Today, those streets echo with the silence of fewer voices, a stark reminder of the profound demographic shifts reshaping the state's landscape. As the housing crisis deepens, many of these residents feel abandoned by a system that once promised prosperity and growth. The statistics tell their own story. Texas, long celebrated for its sprawling urban developments, now struggles with a housing deficit that has serious ripple effects across its cities and towns. The numbers are staggering when you consider that institutional investors have been less active in the market. In San Antonio, for example, these investors acquired only 9.5% of the homes sold in 2024, a noticeable decline from the previous year. This shift is indicative of larger trends where investors are reevaluating the long-term stability of the market, influenced by factors like rising home prices, wage stagnation, and a growing sense of economic unease. However, the crisis is not merely a product of economic forces. Several local policies have contributed significantly to this unfolding drama. Restrictive zoning laws, coupled with vehement opposition from affluent homeowners in what many call a NIMBYist, not in my backyard mindset, have stifled construction. Over the past 25 years, cities in the Sunbelt have experienced an artificial slowdown in housing development, echoing patterns once observed in coastal cities. This has resulted in pricing structures that favor the few, while leaving a vast majority marginalized in a competitive housing market. As society grapples with these issues, experts from academic institutions and urban policy boards have weighed in with somber reflections. They explain that these housing shortages have far-reaching implications. The lack of affordable housing not only stymies economic growth, but also increasingly divides communities along class, age, and racial lines. Through carefully documented interviews, they identify how economic incentives misaligned with the interests of everyday residents are exacerbating an already fragile situation. One compelling narrative comes from the city of Princeton, Texas. In a striking juxtaposition, this city is recognized as the fastest-growing city in the United States, a 30% population surge within a single year, illustrating that growth on its own does not solve the fundamental problems of housing availability and affordability. The rapid expansion in some urban centers masks the deeper systemic issues that have left other areas struggling. Princeton's success, while notable, highlights the uneven distribution of growth. As some communities boom, others are condemned to a cycle of neglect, slowly descending into ghost town status. The heart of our documentary lies in the voices of those directly affected by these trends. In a small town where generations once thrived, residents recount how the hospitality of their community gave way to uncertainty and economic hardship when new housing developments became a coveted rarity. They share memories of open community spaces and lively local business scenes, now replaced by boarded-up storefronts and silent, empty streets. This transformation provides a human face to the indifferent statistics on paper, serving as a powerful reminder of the stakes involved. Amid this growing crisis, policymakers have begun to turn their attention to what might be done. Discussions about revising zoning laws and reforming local housing policies come to the fore, yet progress remains painstakingly slow. Urban planners and economists emphasize that any sustainable solution must include broad-based changes, supporting affordable housing initiatives, subsidizing construction projects aimed at low-income families, and incentivizing developers to create inclusive communities. Although these measures are in their infancy, they represent a potential pathway out of the crisis, a rare glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak forecast. Behind every number, behind every statistic, is a story of struggle and resilience. Consider the narrative of a family in a shrinking Texas town whose hopes for upward mobility have been dashed by persistent rent hikes and scarce employment opportunities. Their story is interwoven with those of many others across the state, a tapestry of human triumphs and trials in the face of an unfolding economic disaster. Their accounts reveal how urban decline and housing shortages can fracture community bonds, leaving people isolated in a rapidly changing world. In examining these multifaceted issues, our documentary stands at the intersection of hard data and personal experience. Footage of dilapidated neighborhoods, abandoned storefronts, and empty streets serve as visual testaments to economic decline, while on-the-ground interviews humanize what might otherwise be abstract statistics. Through this lens, we see that the housing crisis is not only a legal and financial challenge, but also a profound social issue that threatens the very fabric of community life. The central conflict of our narrative is clear. As economic and demographic forces push some Texas cities to the brink, the ghost towns emerging on the horizon are emblematic of neglected policy and unmet community needs. In the coming minutes, we delve into the intricate interplay between these factors, peeling back layers of policy decisions, market dynamics, and societal attitudes that have cumulatively led to this predicament. Steadily, the narrative unfolds. We shift our focus from the desolation of abandoned towns to the vibrant yet troubled centers where the housing crisis meets a rapidly expanding population. Here, the voices of city leaders, urban planners, and economists create a mosaic of opinions, each highlighting the challenges and opportunities inherent in Texas's evolving urban landscape. They paint a picture of a state at a crossroads, one where the promise of growth is marred by the reality of deep-seated economic disparities. One economist explains that the trend is not unique to Texas. Instead, it mirrors a national retreat by investors who are increasingly wary of the long-term viability of home purchases in overheated markets. Investors are recalibrating their strategies, shifting their focus away from speculation and towards more sustainable, community-focused developments. Such changes are critical in understanding the shifting dynamics of home ownership in Texas, where rapid population growth in some urban pockets contrasts sharply with decline in other regions. Meanwhile, historical comparisons offer further insight. Similar patterns can be seen in coastal cities from decades past, where unchecked growth and restrictive policies led to long-term housing affordability issues. Texas appears destined to echo these historical precedents, yet with differences wrought by its unique demographic and economic trajectory. These reflections are not meant to induce despair, but to catalyze a sense of urgency among policymakers and community leaders alike. The past, after all, offers both warnings and lessons for the future. As our journey continues, the narrative shifts to an exploration of potential remedies. Visionary urban planners propose reimagining zoning laws, designing mixed-use communities that prioritize accessibility and affordability. Their proposals are bold, aiming to bridge the gap between rapid economic growth and the essential need for sustainable, affordable housing. By investing in community-centered developments and reducing bureaucratic red tape, these experts argue Texas can revert its trajectory, reviving failing towns and ensuring that burgeoning cities do not leave their less fortunate neighbors behind. The documentary takes a closer look at the decision-making processes behind these policies. Interviews with local policymakers reveal the complex interplay of economic interests, political pressures, and societal expectations. They acknowledge that while short-term solutions may alleviate immediate hardships, the crisis demands long-term structural changes to urban planning and resource allocation. This dialogue not only humanizes the often impersonal realm of economic policy, but also underscores the inherent challenges in reconciling rapid growth with equity and sustainability. In every segment of our exploration, a recurring theme emerges: the critical importance of foresight. Cities that once flourished through dynamic planning are now in peril due to a failure to adapt to changing economic realities. The housing crisis of 2025 is not a phenomenon to be solved by isolated decisions. It is the culmination of decades of policy choices, market forces, and community responses. The pressing question facing Texas today is whether its leaders have the ingenuity and resolve to chart a course for recovery before more towns fade into the shadows of history. Our investigation has taken us through urban landscapes at the height of growth, to rural communities in decline, and into the boardrooms where future policy is being shaped. With each story and statistic, it becomes increasingly clear that the housing crisis is both a challenge and a catalyst, a call to action for a more inclusive and sustainable future. The ghost towns of Texas are not relics of a bygone era. They are a warning, a symbol of what happens when economic imbalances are left unchecked. As we near the conclusion of our narrative, the urgency of the situation is undeniable. Behind the fading images of abandoned neighborhoods is a dynamic community of people yearning for renewal. They represent the resilience of Texans who have faced adversity time and again. Yet the solution remains elusive. An honest reckoning with the causes of this crisis offers a glimmer of hope. With bold policy shifts, community-driven initiatives, and a renewed commitment to equitable development, the decline can be reversed. In these final moments, our story circles back to the human element. The ghosts of these once thriving towns are not just symbols of failure, but testaments to forgotten potentials and lost opportunities. They stand as solemn reminders that the cost of inaction is measured not only in empty streets and abandoned homes, but in the disintegration of community bonds. Each city we have visited offers a lesson in the profound impact of housing policies and economic neglect. As we reflect on the journey through these transforming Texas cities, a single message resonates. With informed decision-making and courageous leadership, the future is not set in stone. The trajectory of these towns can be redirected. Today, we stand at a pivotal moment, one where the choices made by policymakers, community leaders, and everyday citizens will determine the kind of legacy left for future generations. The analysis presented here is both a warning and a call for redemption. For the citizens of Texas and for the nation as a whole, the challenge is clear. The housing crisis of 2025 is not an unavoidable fate. It is a call to action, a demand for change that must be met with innovation, empathy, and deliberate, sustained effort. The ghost towns we have seen are potent symbols of what is at risk if this crisis remains unaddressed. In conclusion, as the shadows lengthen over these once thriving communities, we must ask ourselves, what kind of future do we envision for our cities and towns? The answer lies in our collective willingness to confront hard truths and commit to transformative change. The transformation of 10 Texas cities into ghost towns should inspire us to act, to learn from history, and to embrace solutions that will safeguard the promise of vibrant, inclusive communities for all. Join us as we delve into the stories of 10 Texas cities on the brink, exploring the factors that led to their decline and what can be done to prevent more towns from turning into ghost towns.